Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. Welcome to episode 200 of the Sample Chapter Podcast. Man, we have a great show for you today. We are going to be visiting with Toronto author, first-time author, Sean McCallum. He is here to discuss his first book, The Recalcitrant Stuff of Life. I said it right that time, Sean. We are discussing not only the book, but we're talking about character growth, the world that has opened up to him by being a published author, and that compulsion to write. So many other things that's coming up, in addition to a very descriptive reading, one that you are going to absolutely love. I mean, let me tell you, you can feel the sweat and smell the smoke and stale beer coming from this reading. And when you hear this, you're going to understand what I'm talking about. So all of that is coming up here in just a few minutes, so stay tuned to that. Meanwhile, oh my gosh, episode 200, it is here. And I know, here a couple months ago, when I first talked about this, I talked about maybe trying to do something special, but a lot of you who've been following the show know a little bit of what I've been dealing with in the background. I have a lot of personal things happening right now, a lot of things keeping me very, very busy, and still making time for the show, but I just didn't have the time to put in the extra effort it would take to do a special celebration today. So we're doing a, almost like just a regular episode, but still, I did want to take a few moments here and go over some of the highlights. Not like specific authors, because everybody's going to have their favorites. Whether it's today, whether it's Sean or or maybe Shanti a couple weeks ago, or a 14-year-old author, or maybe it's a celebrity author that we've had over the time. Everybody's going to have their own favorites, and I it's hard for me to pick a favorite because I've valued every one of them, and I've learned something from every one of them. But since I began this show in January of 2018, I had done the math before, and I think this is about right. I've got about 185 authors in that time. Now, I know some of you are like, wait, you have 200 episodes. Well, I've had some authors on here multiple times, twice, or maybe even 3 times. Armand Rosamilia, he's been a 3-timer. My first year, I had 2 episodes. I did like a mid-year wrap-up talking about how the year had gone so far, because I didn't have the authors pounding down the door, blowing up my email, asking to come on the show. And then I did an end-of-the-year wrap-up that first year. So that was 2 episodes. Not to mention my very first episode was just me talking about what the show was going to be about. So I had that. And then along the way, I've also had... I count my first episode... episode 13, which is me reading from my first book. I count that one because my daughters actually interviewed me and did a fantastic job. And, I was the author. I was the guest for that week. However, I've also done that 2 more times with my other books over the years, and I just talked about it myself. I didn't have anybody interviewing me. Something I have since then been gone after. People have been kind of beating me up a little bit for that, for not having somebody interview me again. So we'll see what happens in the future if I do, read from a future book. Maybe I will have somebody interview me. My wife has actually even offered to do that, and a couple of former guests have also offered their services to interview me. So that's cool. It's a lot of fun. But so outside of myself and standalone episodes, episode 100 was a big celebration. No interviews that time, and we actually had a little crossover with other podcasts coming on and doing things. So in that time, around 185, maybe 1 or 2 less than that, or maybe a little more than that. It's hard to say exactly. I was losing count. I was trying to do this over a couple of days, but I was always being interrupted. But still, in that time, that blows my mind to have so many of them, so many incredible authors on the show. And every one of you have been incredible. And to every one of my previous guests, leading up to episode 200, I just want to say thank you. You are incredible. You are talented, and for you to come on this little show and display the talent that you have has touched me, and it means the world to me. Thank you so much. So in that time, we've got more than 25,000 downloads. Now I know that doesn't maybe to some people like Joe Rogan, who's getting maybe that much per episode, or a million per episode, but we're not doing that. But in that in 4 years' time, I've had 25,000, more than 25,000 downloads. I'm very happy with that. Very, very happy with that. And I have seen a lot of growth with the show in the last 2 years. I guess actually since we did episode 100, I think that's when the show really started to get some legs under it and take off. We've got more than 5,000 of those come from our YouTube channel. So that's only been around for about a year and a half that we've been doing that. So that has really caught some legs as well. We have more than 1,200 followers across our social media platforms, and we have been the episodes have been downloaded in more than 40 countries worldwide. I had no idea when, going back to 2018 when I started this, that it would have this kind of reach, that so many people would be listening to the show. But I'm thrilled that it is. And oh my gosh, it's my dream that somebody out there somewhere in the world is finding an author that they've never heard of and say, and in listening to the show, they go, wow, that sounds like a cool book. I want to check that out. So they click the links and go from there. And that's what I really want. That's what I was hoping for all along. And, if you've done that, if you've found a book because of the show, please let me know. Reach out to the show. Follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. It's just the Sample Chapter Podcast. Very, very easy to find. So go in there and let us know that you found the show. You found some books that you've loved because of that. Let me know what some of the books are that you've enjoyed, and if you can, go back and share that episode. Every episode is still available up on samplechapterpodcast.com, so you can still go in there. I don't know about some of the podcast players, how many episodes they show. I know iTunes and some of the other ones, the big ones, they still show every episode. You can go back and download all of them, but I don't know what that threshold is on all of them. So, but you can always go back to samplechapterpodcast.com and find every episode. So, make sure you do that. Had a lot of fun. I can't believe that I've written 3 books in that time, and that's a nice feeling. That in these years that I've been able to do that many. I had hoped that I would get a little faster with it, and it's nice to have 2 books in less than a year. So that's a nice record compared to my first one in 8 years. My first one was in 2018. I'd been working on it for like 7-8 years. I wrote my next book, came out right at the tail end of 2020, and then of course Bandit Rising just came out in October. So that's a 10-month span between one and the other, and I'm hoping to continue that kind of streak. I'd like to put my books out a little more regularly, and equally I'm going to continue doing this show because I enjoy doing it, and obviously there's people out there who are finding some enjoyment in it, and I've got tons of authors reaching out to the show on email and in social media wanting to come on. So by all means, I'm going to keep this thing going. And of course, what keeps the lights on is, some of my partners like Scrivener. They are my favorite writing software. They've been with us for, good grief, 2.5 years now. And I absolutely adore them. My representative there, she is just fantastic. She checked in on me after my surgery to see how I was doing, and just amazing people, all of them over at Scrivener, just incredible. Highly recommend that you at least download the trial and check it out. And when I did that, I just tried it out. I just dove in and used it kind of like what you would do with Word, and over time I've learned things about it. And I also later on downloaded the app on my iPhone so that way I could write anywhere. And I've done that over the years, and it's amazing. I absolutely adore Scrivener. So with that in mind, I invite you to check out this little ad spot and find out how you can save 20% on the regular desktop version. Jason here. Hey, I wanted to take a moment and tell you about my favorite writing tool, Scrivener. Now, I know you've heard about Scrivener because their writing software has been embraced by hundreds of thousands of other writers like you and I, from the novice to best-selling novelists. The reason we all use it is because of Scrivener's core concept to bring all the writing tools you use together in a single application. And with tools like automatic backup, character maps, project goals, and let's not forget that amazing corkboard, you can see why I use Scrivener every day. As a bonus for Sample Chapter podcast listeners, use code CHAPTER for 20% off your desktop version. Scrivener writing software, built by writers for writers. Like Scrivener, I also have another partner, an affiliate of the show called Writer's Block Coffee. So they have 3 different blends for you to try out. There's the signature blend Writer's Block, the Deadline Dark, which is sure to keep you up at all hours, night or day, so you can finish that first draft, and the Whiskey Barrel Aged, which is my own personal favorite. You can order one time or set up a monthly auto ship, so that way you never run out. Make sure you click that link in the show notes, so that way you get right over to our page for it, and use that coupon code SAMPLECHAPTER to save 10% on your order. Hey, I also want to thank my friends over at Pop Goes the Culture Network, home to about half a dozen other shows, all of them pop culture related and all of them incredible. The flagship show of that network, Pop Goes the Culture podcast, hosted by Joey Mills and the whole gang over there. Fantastic show, great group of people who know what they're talking about when it comes to pop culture. And I was honored to be a guest on the show recently, just this past week. Make sure you click the link in the show notes so you can get over and find that episode. And I also shared it on social media. But it was great. Joey interviewed me on the show to talk about this show and to talk about my latest book, Bandit Rising, since it is a real pop culture type book. You know, it's a very 80s throwback kind of thing. And it was so much fun. It was such a great time. Joey had so many great questions and really, was a lot of fun to dive into the book with him. So, like I said, click that link in the show notes to get over to the network, and you can see the link in there for the most recent episode, and I'll be sharing that on my social media as well, so you can find it there as well. But, I've rambled on enough, which means it is time for me to wrap this up, and, I don't really have a good transition for this today, so we'll just cut things off here and get on over to our interview with today's guest, Sean McCallum. Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. Oh man, we are having a good time today talking with our guest, Sean McCallum, enthusiastic dad, replacement level husband, reluctant suburbanite. Our guest, Sean McCallum, comes to us from out of Toronto, Canada, where he lives with his wife and 2 children. And we're going to be discussing his writing life and his debut novel, The Recalcitrant Stuff of Life. Hey, welcome to the show, Sean.
All right, Jason, thanks very much for having me. Really appreciate it. And you nailed the pronunciation of that book, which is something that I've messed up myself a few times. It's a mouthful, but nicely done.
Thank you. It's probably the coffee warming up my tongue just enough where I can do it right. So it's, but you don't know how many times I was practicing it before this. So that's nice. What it was.
Well, paid off.
It paid off. That's right. Well, hey man, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on the podcast number 200 here. So this is pretty impressive. So thanks very much for having me.
Honor is all mine, man. I'm really happy to have you here.
Yeah, no, it's things are going well. We released this book coming up on 2 months ago now. Mm-hmm. It was released October 15th, and the response has been really positive so far. And I think the sales been decent. So yeah, things are going well. So it's been great so far.
Fantastic, fantastic. So now let's get a little bit of your background. Have you always been a writer? Have you always wanted to be a writer, or what do you do?
Yeah, I probably always wanted to have been a writer, but didn't really consider myself a writer until until I started getting published. But certainly from the time I was about 15 or 16 years old, writing short stories, and I've got an interesting cast of characters as friends, and so I was always sort of chronicling our exploits and sending sort of emails to the group of some of the debaucherous things we got up to, and so lots of short stories, lots of blog entries. I had a blog for a little while just talking about some of the crazy things we used to do, and then I studied English literature at university. Shout out to Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. So obviously got a pretty decent background and in the great works of fiction through that program. And then after I graduated, I studied at the Humber School for Writers in Toronto, which is a creative writing post-grad program. So worked with a lot of great people at Humber there. So just writing has always been a part of my life. It's something I feel like I absolutely need to do. Certainly don't feel like myself unless I'm writing. But of course it's tough to keep up with the writing if you've got a wife and kids and a job and everything else, all of those other responsibilities. So but it's certainly been a part of my life since my formative years.
I can totally relate. I mean, everything you were talking about, I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm right there with you. Writing was always, it always brought me back. I always came back to it. I'm like, oh, now I'm busy. Gotta work. I gotta do the 60-hour week and all this other stuff. But it was always there in the back of my mind. I'm always like thinking about, oh man, I want to write this story one day and do this. And it was just, it finally brought me back in one day. I was like, hey, you know what? I do have time, and I'm gonna do this now. And it is glad to see, other people as well doing the same thing of getting in there and making that time and coming up with a story like what you have. And that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot like a compulsion for me. I mean, honestly, if I go for a couple of months without putting pen to paper, I don't feel right. I start having recurring nightmares, about the same thing. But I know there's times I've tried to step away from it, and then it's just this compulsion. You feel like there's something in you that needs to come out. So it's more of a sickness than anything else, really.
I think my wife would agree with you.
Yeah.
So now, do you like to write every day, or are you like okay with like, I missed yesterday, no big deal? Or is it?
I'd like to think, I mean, certainly make a conscious effort to try writing every day, but of course life gets in the way. My kids are still relatively young, 10 and 8. So don't want to take any time away from spending time with them. But yeah, when I'm writing, which, I'm not right now, I'm sort of in, just had the book published and let's try to do some press for it mode, but hoping by the new year, we'll be back into writing mode. And I had a great writer friend of mine, when I was struggling a little bit, he said to me, he gave me some great advice. He used to take the train into work every day, and he'd say, honestly, take 20 minutes on the train ride in to write, and then 20 minutes on the train ride back. He's like, that's your starting point. And if you can just find 20 minutes every day, you're going to be on the right track, because that'll really get the creative juices flowing, and you'll be on your way. So I think it's vitally important to try to grind it out there, even if you feel like that inspiration isn't there. Sit down, confront that blank page, go to work, and put in the time. So that's the goal, is to sit down every day and put in at least 20 minutes and take it from there.
I love that. I love that. That's such great advice. And it's definitely true in my own life. Once I made that commitment, then the things I used to do in the morning, whether it was gaming or watching the DVR, that became my writing time. And even if it was just half an hour or less, it was just, and it's amazing how much I can get done now. Just taking that little bit of time. And that's my special time now. It's like the coffee's ready. Nobody else is up. I've got this little bit of time. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to sit down and write. And oh man, it seems like that's my way of starting my day more times than not, of being able to do that. And then I can go on with the rest of the day. And I feel like, okay, I've done something today.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing is, I mean, if you're writing, again, if it's only 20 minutes a day, you're thinking about it all the time. And so,
Oh
in the
gosh,
middle of
yes.
the day, it's, you've got things going on in your head. And I know my wife will sometimes be talking to me and I'm looking at her and I'm nodding and I'm smiling and I'm doing all the right things, but there's something I'm thinking about what's the plot or what this character is going to say to that other character, which, it's because that it's working itself out in your mind. So yeah, it all starts with putting in that work and just sitting down and writing.
So tell me here, something I've already had the experience with, but we were discussing a little bit before we got started. The world that has opened up to you of being a published author. What has that been like after the release of your first book?
Yeah, it's been interesting. Again, like you, always writing, but I never really talked about myself as a writer. Certainly never spoke about everything or spoke about anything I was writing about. I always sort of felt like there's two ways. There's sort of two kinds of writers in the world. They're the ones who talk about it and then the ones who do it. So I was always just like put my head down, write, and if I'm fortunate enough to ever have something published, then I'll be willing to talk about it. Otherwise, it's like, the pitcher with the no-hitter going, just don't talk to him. Don't want to jinx anything. So I just, most people, I mean, of course, my closest family knew that I was trying to be a writer, but not that I was actively engaged in the process. So it wasn't until, we had sort of put pen to paper on the deal with Outcast Press, and we had figured out we were going to get this thing published, and we had a release date. That was sort of when I first started talking about it, and so many people were shocked that, like, when did you have time to write a book? Little did they know I'd been sort of plugging away at it for 10 years. It certainly doesn't happen overnight. What I got most commonly from people was, I can't believe you wrote a book during the pandemic. It was like, no. Believe me, it didn't happen in that year. So the way it's changed for me is just in being able to talk about myself, I guess, as a writer. Like the first step in the 12-step process, right? Admitting it. So, I sort of was okay. I'd come to terms with, it was okay to talk about being a writer, which I think was a big step for me. So, I mean, that was probably the first thing. But how my life certainly hasn't changed. Maybe people look at you a little differently now than they previously had. But it's been really amazing to get the feedback from people I truly respect, getting the feedback on the book. I've heard from some people, like I said, that I really respect, who really enjoyed it. Some people who found some sort of profound sort of things in the work, which was really cool to hear. I've had some mental health professionals reach out to say that some of these characters really resonated with them because they work in this field, and there's a lot that they could see as being true in the book. So it's been really gratifying and humbling to hear that feedback. So it's great having people read it and having it hit the mark on what I had hoped to for the work to achieve.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. So, do you do any of your writing around family? Like, do they come in to your office and see you, or like?
I mean, they're not supposed to, but with young kids, sometimes it's hard to keep them out. I usually, when I'm writing, it's after the kids have gone to bed, so I need it to be a pretty solitary exercise. I'll jot down notes, of course, when there's people around. But if I'm really engaged in the practice and in really getting into it, I need to be alone and need it to be as quiet as possible.
Well, and I guess what I was wondering there was, you mentioned a while ago about the voices in your head, and we hear these characters, their voices and their personalities, and it makes me wonder sometimes, like with my wife, it took her a little while to get used to it, because sometimes she is up with me in the morning and she'll be sitting there having her coffee, quietly reading while I'm writing, and I'll be chuckling along with something a character said in my head as I'm writing.
Yeah.
And she's just kind of like, will look at me and she goes, character? I'm like, character. And say, well, I move on. So do you have any experiences like that?
No, I mean, yes, thinking about things and chuckling, and yeah, I think my wife will have thought that I've lost my mind, but yeah, not when I'm sort of engaged in the writing. I definitely need to be alone. I admire the fact that you can write with your wife or with anyone in the room. That's a great sign. I think it was John Steinbeck, talking about the sign of true love is, you can sit down and write with your partner in the room and be completely at ease with it. So I think that's a good sign that that you can get that done. I'm not quite there yet. I need to be completely solitaire, I think, when I'm writing.
I think it comes over time. I know when I was working on my first book, we weren't quite there yet. So she was just like, well, what are you doing? Why are you working on this? Right? Now that I've had a couple of books in, she understands my mental process or mental breakdowns, however it is at this point. And we have an understanding. So, the recalcitrant stuff of life, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, that's it. It's fine.
There it is. I got it. Yeah.
I get to choose the title, right? You think I would pick something a little a little easier to pronounce, but
now my understanding is this is inspired in some way by the movie Bright Lights, Big City. Tell us about this.
Yeah, I wouldn't say inspired by it. I'm a huge fan of Jay McInerney. It's really his writing style that I love. That sort of propulsive cadence. If you've read any of his work, I mean, it really is like free flowing, either consciousness or conversation. So I'm just a huge fan of his writing style. So I wouldn't say that the story, the novel itself, is inspired by Bright Lights, Big City, but that book had a pretty profound impact on me. I remember an uncle of mine who's an English teacher, retired English teacher now, but he handed me that book when I was, I think in my first year of university, and he said, hey, you need to read this. And I hadn't seen the movie at the time. It was all brand new to me. And I remember reading that, you open it up, the first page, it's written in the second person. And I was just like, whoa, I didn't know you were allowed to write like this. Like, it was amazing. It really blew my mind. So big fan of Jay McInerney. So certainly the writing style is, I borrowed, not that the recalcitrant stuff of life is written in the second person, but just that sort of propulsive cadence of his writing style. I'd like to think I've tried to borrow a little bit of that.
Nice. And it's you kind of I'm just trying to guess here a little bit here. It sounds like when you were talking before about writing adventures of your friends or anything, did some of that come into play with this?
A little bit, yeah. So the inspiration for this novel, it almost all takes place in Peru. And really just some, I guess, background on the plot. It's about, the main character, his name is Rosie. He has experienced a little bit of trauma in his life, and he wants to just escape from everything, escape from reality. So he heads to Peru on his own. There is a town in the jungle, a city called Iquitos, and it is famous for being the largest city in the world that cannot be accessed by road. So it's sort of deep in the heart of the Amazon. You either need to fly in, or you need to take a 3-day trip down the Amazon River to get to this city. So he hides out in this city just to try to escape from reality and from everything that he's sort of all those demons in his head, he's trying to escape. And then he's got two friends from home who, there's something has come up and they need to track him down and bring him back home. So you've sort of got the dual narrative of this one main character hiding out, and then his two buddies trying to track him down and bring him home. So you've got that sort of buddy cop thing going on where they're trying to get to him. So you got the two things going on. So a lot of that, a lot of the buddy stuff with the two guys is taken from guys I know and from stupid things we've done. And then, I've spent a lot of time down in Peru. My wife is actually from Peru. So a lot of that writing comes from experience and really firsthand what I've seen down there. So that's sort of what went into the recalcitrant stuff of life.
Oh man, fantastic. That sounds amazing. And it's been People are relating to it as ambitious, gritty, and raucously entertaining, which is some high praise. That sounds amazing. I would love to have a book, being described as such.
Yeah. There's certainly some raucous moments. Yeah. It's, you get two guys south of the equator traveling around. They're going to get into some trouble. So there's there's a whole bunch of that. But yeah, but it certainly does touch on some deeper things. It's not all laughs, but yeah, there's some things about the meaning of life and the origins of the universe and what does it all mean. There's a whole bunch of that in there tied in with the fun stuff.
Yeah. But, and I think that's what makes the story good is you've got the growth. You've got them doing a little bit of introspective looking. And what a better time to do that than on a big adventure like this. I mean, going from Toronto to Peru and looking for someone who is going through their own issue in life right then. And, that it just seems like that's the perfect time to have something like this where you can look within and discover things about yourself while finding your friend.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's we as people, we grow when we're faced with adversity, right? That's when you learn the most about yourself, and certainly the characters in this novel face a lot of adversity. So that's they may not even realize when it's happening that they're growing, but I think there's certainly a lot of spiritual and personal introspection going on as they face some of the obstacles along the way here. So that's certainly at work here.
Oh, fantastic. So now, where did you develop the idea for this, and like how did the characters kind of come to you?
Yeah, so I had years ago, in 2006. I, was working a decent job back home. I was in my late 20s and I just decided I was going to quit my job and backpack around South America for 5 months. So, one of those life decisions. So part of that backpacking, quote unquote, finding myself involved spending a lot of time in Peru. And I did take this sort of 3-day slow boat down the river to Iquitos, and just some of the wild stuff that I saw on that boat ride. I mean, it's pretty amazing when you just sort of immerse yourself in that world with the locals. So that was really cool. I was enamored with this place, Iquitos, because it's just the wildest town you can ever imagine. It is just, I mean, Peru itself is it's quite different from Canada and the US. But Iquitos more so than anything else, because it's just this wild frontier city where chaos reigns supreme. It is the Wild West, but in the Amazon. And so I was just like really taken with that place. And I remember thinking this would be really cool to have a book set here. So that was sort of the impetus for the idea. And then 2 years later, and I should note, and I've mentioned this before in other conversations, the first time I went to Peru, I did not enjoy myself there. It was like I got ripped off. I got counterfeit money. I got the worst case of food poisoning you could ever imagine. It was just when I left Peru, my thinking was, yeah, I'm never going back. Like, that's it for me. Like that David Foster Wallace thing, like a supposedly fun thing I'll never do again. That was me going to Peru. But then 2 years later, I came across an article in National Geographic, of all places, and it was about this shaman in the Amazon and the work he was doing with ayahuasca. And I read it, and it sounded terrifying and it sounded insane. And I was like, yeah, I think I need to do that. So lo and behold, there I was on a plane back to Peru. And, if you fly into or out of Peru, you're flying into and out of Lima. So I was in Lima for a couple of nights before heading into the jungle, and I checked into this hostel, and it was Halloween, and I met this beautiful young lady, and we hit it off. And then I went into the jungle for 2 weeks and spent the better part of 2 weeks with a shaman, participating in multiple ayahuasca rituals and ayahuasca ceremonies where you just have your your whole world and your whole consciousness sort of blown to a million different pieces. So that was pretty profound as an experience. And then I came back to Lima for one more night, reconnected with this young lady, and we had a sort of an amazing night together. And I got back on the plane the next day, and I just somehow knew that I was going to marry this girl, and that was it. So based upon that, and that whole ayahuasca experience, I began formulating what would become the plot of the recalcitrant stuff of life. So it was like the first part of it was going to Peru and experiencing it, and just having this setting where everything could go wrong. And then, and then having all of these crazy, profound, life-altering experiences while I was down there. I thought, this, I think we've got something here. So I got to work on writing this novel.
That's quite a story.
Cool. I like to say I went to Peru to gather material for a book, and I came home with a wife. So I will say I've told this story before, but I'm sure most of your listeners haven't heard it. When I was there seeing the shaman, I was just there because I wanted to write about it. I was not really there for any spiritual reasons or trying to overcome any trauma or anything like that. I just thought it'd be something really cool to write about. But the shaman pulled me aside the one day, and he said, "Hey, you have no idea why you're here, but I know, and it'll all make sense to you in 1 year's time." I sort of thought that was a bit of a interesting comment for him to make. Thought it was a bit of a throwaway, but lo and behold, I want to say it was 1 year to the day after he said that was when I married, my Peruvian wife. So I don't know what he knew that I didn't know, but I guess the world works in mysterious ways.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic.
So there's a bit of that in the book here.
Oh, great. I love that. I love it whenever you can bring some of your life experiences, some real things into a story, and it's a little nod between you and the people who know. And they're like, "Yep, little wink."
Yeah, exactly.
Yep,
yeah, and I feel like I need to write about things that I have some idea of what I'm talking about. I'm a fiction writer, but it needs to be based in reality for me, or else I'll feel like I'm lying a little too much.
See, and I think for me, that's when I finally hit upon, I think personally, I think that's what they mean when they say, write what you know. I used to like what, I don't know. Okay, let's see. I've had this job. I've had this job. I've had this job, but what do I really know? I'm like, well, I know fishing, but nobody wants to read that right now.
Hey, man, the old man in the sea.
Well, there you go. But I think it was once I got to working on my first book, and I'd been struggling with it for a while. And then I decided, like, you know what, I'm going to start over for NaNoWriMo, and I'm just going to like let the brain go and just see where it goes. And I was just letting all kinds of like real stuff kind of bounce around here and there with the story. And then same thing with my second book. And I was like, you know what? I realize it now. I get it. I'm letting some real life experiences like kind of come in and feed this. And I feel like that's what it is. That's writing what you know. And it's helpful as a writer.
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
Do that.
Yeah, just from the heart, right?
Yeah. So it's definitely needs the edits to go back through and go, oh, that's a little too on the nose. I don't want people asking about this or that. So.
Yeah, it's all well and good when when it's just on your laptop, but if it's going to get out into the world, you want to make sure you're not you don't want to out too many people or offend too many folks.
There you go. Oh my gosh. So what's next for you?
Well, I think, for the next month or so, certainly till the beginning of the new year, we're just going to work on promoting this novel. We certainly want it to get into as many hands as possible. But as far as writing goes, there's a couple of different things. I've got a manuscript I wrote in my 20s that I think is good, but I haven't looked at it in 10 years. So I'm going to go back and probably be mortified at what's on the page, but I'm going to take a look at that to see if there's some work that can be done on that to get that out. Because when I wrote that one in my late 20s, I got a really good response. It landed me an agent. So there's certainly something there. I don't know how well it's aged, so I'll take a peek at that. But I do have sort of the beginnings of a nonfiction work that I'm gonna probably put most of my energy into for the next couple of years, and it's just centered around, my wife and I. We've had some interesting experiences with our kids, lots of fun. So sort of like dysfunctional parenting 101 that I think could make for some interesting anecdotal stories. So, I'll take a look at that. I have no idea whether that's something anyone will want to read, but I feel like that's what I want to write. So we'll see if it's got any legs.
Outstanding. All right. Well, where can people find and follow you so that they can hear whenever the next book is ready?
Yeah. So on Twitter, my Twitter handle is Sean SEAN 42. And then my last name, McCallum, MCCALLUM. And then I've got just my author website, which is SeanMcCallum.com. So you can check me out there. You can check out Outcast Press. They're a great little indie press based out of the US, specializing in transgressive fiction. They've been phenomenal to work with. So you can check them out. They've got some really interesting things coming in the spring. So either check out me or check out Outcast Press. Great group down there.
Outstanding. Yeah. And well, of course, everybody, I'm going to have links for that in the show notes so that after you get done hearing about this, you can click those links and head over to his website and Outcast Press as well, and follow him on social media and sign up for his newsletter so that way you can hear all about the recalcitrant stuff of life and what's next for Sean.
Yeah, that's right. No, and I should say, obviously the book is available on Amazon. I think that's probably the best way to get it.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's available right now, everyone, and it's got some great reviews, lots of good feedback on here, and people are loving it. So, and I think I'm anxious to hear this first chapter, or I don't know which chapter we're hearing. I'm anxious to hear this chapter.
We'll start at the beginning. We'll do chapter 1.
All right. Well, I'm anxious to hear from this today, and we'll go from there. But thank you so much, Sean, for being a part of the show and part of this legacy I'm building on here. And episode 200, I couldn't think of a better way to kick off the next 200.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much. And hey, I should warn your listeners, there is some salty language and some mature subject themes in this book, but certainly in the first chapter. So if you've got little ones in the car, maybe press pause till they're out of the car.
All right. So I'm going to be clicking that explicit tag for this one today. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, time for me to step aside with some writer's block coffee and enjoy this sample chapter from our guest, Sean McCallum, and the recalcitrant stuff of life.
All right. The recalcitrant stuff of life. Chapter 1, Monday, Iquitos, Peru. How the fuck did I get here? The question hangs in the air long enough to solicit agonizing contemplation. I sit alone in the back of a black market gentlemen's club the local degenerates will point you to if you spend any length of time in town. But the place is about as covert as a 7th grade erection. And the closest thing to a gentleman is the guy who scrubs the urinals in the awful, unspeakable morning. It's the place you come if you don't have the stomach for self-mutilation, but want the spiritual equivalent. Everyone knows this is nowhere. And if this joint had a name, that's what it'd be. I know it's an unhealthy exercise, but I've recently become obsessed with stringing together the sequence of decisions and events that brought me to this or that exact place and time, the present moment of reckoning always a damning indictment of my existence. For example, staring through the smoky haze to a makeshift stage where a girl with a scar on her stomach and a glazed look in her eyes dances, her skin the color of the river as she sways, awkward and serpentine. And I know it's just solipsism playing tricks, but it feels like she's dancing just for me. And then it's down the rabbit hole we go, with the recurring thought that it isn't only the obvious watershed decisions that shape the course of a life. Which college should I attend? Maybe I should quit my job and bum around Europe for a while. What always gets me is the procession of seemingly insignificant decisions, the decisions that don't feel like decisions at all. I take a long swig of beer, piss warm in the jungle night. Those are the moments that really take us down the path. the magazine you flip through in the dentist's office, the parking spot you pass up at the supermarket, the headlines you read at the newsstand before grabbing a Sunday morning coffee. It's a mind fuck of the highest order to retrace that line and weigh the infinite spiderweb junctions where your life could have landed you, selling beads on a beach in the South Pacific just as easily as it could have left you with a gun in your mouth. At the present time, either would be preferable. The night is sticky and soul-crushing, always, but especially in the miserable hours before the heartbreak of day. When the song ends, the tiny room defaults to a vacuous silence that pushes the boundaries of discomfort. The air is thick with smoke and the musk of sweaty men. A drunk in the corner, El Borracho, momentarily lifts his head, mumbling incoherently. I look around for the guy who gets the drinks, but he's less than a shadow, nowhere to be found. The TV atop the bar flashes muted images of Bugs Bunny captioned in Spanish. The girl is alone on stage, motionless as she looks down at an indeterminate spot on the floor. I reach for the Mapacho cigar tucked behind my ear, allowing it to dangle on my lips a moment. I flick my Zippo lighter and inhale deeply, the bristling crackle of still damp tobacco the only sound in the room. Unable to withstand the quiet any longer, I tap the neck of my bottle with a lighter, the closest I can bring myself to applause. Mistaking this for an invitation, the girl slowly makes her way to my empty table, pulls up a chair, and sits in naked silence. It's like I'm watching somebody else as I offer her a drag of my cigar. She accepts without a word. I pour half my beer into a dirty glass and slide it across the table. ¿Cómo te llamas? She smiles. Aphrodite. Aphrodite. That's a hell of a name. I'm Rosie. A handshake with a naked stripper in a den of depravity seems somehow unnecessarily formal, so I tap her glass with my sweaty bottle. She says something I don't fully understand, but none of it matters. I nod and say "see" a whole bunch, the exchange somehow a blueprint for my existence. The conversation goes like a sewing machine from there, with neither of us speaking more than a few token phrases of the other's tongue. The endless misinterpretations fueled by alcohol and wishful thinking allow each culture's expectations of small talk to vanish into the ether. A ceiling fan spins inconsequentially overhead. Non sequiturs be damned. She leans in close to put a hand on my thigh. For a moment, we stare into each other's eyes. It's no secret that I've given myself a substantial length of rope during this stretch of self-immolation, but that rope seems to have reached its frayed terminus, and bursting to life in its void is the first self-imposed edict I've encountered in this country. I do not go home with Peruvian strippers, no matter how inebriated the two of us are. I can only shake my head, wishing to hell my conscience would ram its head in the muck again. I stand to kiss the girl on the forehead, promising to see her around. I throw some money on the table, not giving a single fuck whether she actually hands it to the barman. On the way out, I wake the drunk in the corner, lightly shaking him and helping him to his feet. The old man is confused, but eventually realizes the hour. We drag ourselves out of the back room, whispering the password to no one as we laugh and climb through a quasi-secret door, weaving through the fake tienda's shelves of dry goods as tiny beams of light shoot through the storefront's rusted door, suspending the sparkling dust. I hoist open the heavy roll-up with a groan, and the two of us, one local looking for a way home, and the other far from home and lost in every sense of the word, step into the warm, haunting mist of early morning Iquitos. The story of modern-day Iquitos begins and ends with its location, deep in the heart of the Peruvian Amazon. This geographic fact attracts a disproportionate number of intrepid backpackers, fugitives, and deadbeat dads ducking their obligations. The remoteness also makes it a monumental pain in the ass to procure virtually anything from the outside world. Lost your passport? Best of luck to you. Want a decent shot of whiskey? Let me introduce you to my friend Jim Beam. How about a ride in an honest-to-goodness automobile? It may sound absurd to imagine an entire city, businessmen, clergymen, and felons alike, tearing around on jerry-rigged choppers, but like all things, the frenetic frontier chaos dissolves into the schizophrenic canvas of everyday life. The unbearable midday heat, the waking cold sweat confusion, you get used to anything. Even the hostel's cast iron gates that once felt like so much incarceration now somehow signify home. The sun is already burning off the daybreak haze when I ease myself onto the hideout's front porch. The tables and chairs are made from the cross sections of giant rainforest trees, their surfaces decorated with the packer calligraphy of cigarette scars and stick letter scrawl. At times like these, drunk and high and more than a little sleep deprived, I find myself transfixed by the patterns in the wood, staring into the lines created by the unbearable crush of time and the unknowable things of the earth. I'm not sure how long I've been watching the motorcycles thunder past when one of the shady locals pokes his head through the gate, hawking jungle tours in broken English through broken teeth. I tell him, no, amigo, but my tombstone eyes are an invitation. He offers me a medley of chemical drugs that would cause the most hardened adventurer to reconsider his place in the world. I would give my kidney for a bottle of water, but it isn't on the menu today. So I smile and shake my head, my bit part in this degenerate's hustle somehow bestowing a sense of bastardized belonging on the miscreant streets of Iquitos. As if on cue, the hideout's proprietor emerges from the kitchen with a cup of steaming instant coffee. He's sporting a stained undershirt and an old pair of gym shorts. Noting my condition, he laughs not so under his breath. Rough night ashore, kid? I exhale audibly, nodding. Tommy had come to Iquitos from Alaska, his formative years spent working around the world on a variety of cargo ships. His repertoire is replete with tales of being held for ransom by pirates off the west coast of Africa, spending weeks with a harem in Morocco, and eating ant soup on the streets of Bali. Nobody knows what to believe when it comes to Tommy's exploits, but like every other expat holed up in the Amazon, there's no shortage of rumors speculating on the legal ramifications of him ever returning to his native country. I remember the days, kid. Those were the fucking days. Tommy lights a cigarette, leaving us sitting in a welcome silence interrupted only by the intermittent roar of the mototaxi's sonic artillery. Tommy catches me eyeing the hostile walls with disdain. They're adorned with an array of anaconda skins, alligator jaws, and taxidermic capybaras poached from the jungle. I sense he's about to broach some subject or another, but I'm too tired to dance. I look him square in the eye, daring him to ask. So I was going through the books the other day. You know how long you've been here? I do indeed, down to the hour, but I plead the fifth. Tommy shakes his head and sips his coffee before coming in with the big reveal. Just under 9 months. He whistles through his teeth and laughs. If you need more money, Tommy. Nah, kid, it ain't the money. You're squared away till the end of the month. It's just, we're both waiting for the other to blink. You know what? Fuck it. It's none of my business. I nod and shift my gaze to the street, thankful for the conversation's conclusion. Amid the silence, Tommy's pet parrot, Lucky, comes waddling onto the front porch. He stands between Tommy and I for a long time, his head moving back and forth between us, as if deciding who to grace with his presence. He eventually jumps onto my table, standing there proudly for the next 10 minutes, screeching, "Puta!" at every passerby. It's the closest I've come to laughing in days. Tommy finishes his coffee and crushes out his cigarette on my table. He picks up his parrot by its clipped wings, and for a moment, the three of us are incredibly still. I feel the man looking at me, hard, knowing he's incapable of letting it go. It's a tough one, kid. No doubt someone done fucked you up real good. A girl, I bet. My eyes are hopelessly fixed on the street. Yeah, Tom, something like that. Most of my days end this way. The alcohol and the sleep deprivation and the galloping thoughts are a dervish's whirl of transcendent exhaustion until I crawl back to my room, a tiny windowless ground floor hovel that feels more subterranean than any basement I've ever known. The walls of exposed concrete are barren and cold to the touch. A 100-watt bulb dangles overhead, illuminating the cinder blocks and 2x4s constituting a bookshelf. The stained mattress lies on the floor, covered by a single unlaundered sheet. The emptiness feels like an implication. I strip to my boxers, then turn off the light. My head hits the pillow like a Justin Rutledge hook. A sliver of harsh daylight pushes beneath the door. As my eyes adjust to the darkness, I go through the ritual of counting the cracks in the ceiling. There's a song running through my head, and I can hear it as if the needle's grinding the vinyl in real time. It's times like these when I feel like a little kid alone in the dark, quietly singing the lyrics, a lullaby and a prayer and a plea all wrapped into one, my voice soft and breaking as I close my eyes and disappear through the smoke rings of my mind.
All right, that was Sean McCallum reading a sample chapter from his debut novel, The Recalcitrant Stuff of Life. The book is available right now. It comes from Outcast Press. Click the links in the show notes for the book and for where to follow Sean, as well as Outcast Press. Don't forget to also click that link in the show notes for our podcast friends and sponsors and affiliates. Get some coffee, get yourself a Scrivener download, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out next week when I'm back with episode 201. Until then, you all take care, and we'll talk to you real soon.